This is Unit 5, Week 1, question number 2. Who was Andrew Carnegie? A really, really rich guy. He was an immigrant, came to the U.S. I think at 12 from Scotland, worked his way up, but during a brief recession he invested all of his money in his savings in this new steel process called the Bessemer steel process. It injected air into iron in the process of making steel so it could make steel cheaper at a lower temperature, still melting metal, pretty hot, and quicker, cheaper, and more effectively, and make stronger steel. When the economy rebounded, he had the best steel product for the best price, and his steel was selling everywhere. He dominated the industry. In fact, steel became the catalyst in the late 19th century for all of the other technologies going on. Without steel, you wouldn't have railroad miles of track. You wouldn't have skyscrapers in New York. Steel launched all of these other industries themselves, which were based on the availability of cheap steel. But how did he get that? Well, he got wealthy by having these factories and promoting immigrants, hiring inexpensive immigrants to work for him, labor in his many factories. One of them, the Homestead factory in Pennsylvania, Homestead Steel Plant, had a huge famous strike in 1892. Carnegie was back in Scotland in a palace he bought for himself. He was not so poor. But his manager of the steel plant, his employee, Mr. Frick, fired all of his workers. They went on strike demanding better pay. So under Carnegie's instruction, Frick just fired all of them. He hired new replacement workers, or scabs. Knowing there'd be possible conflict and violence, he hired private security, the Pinkerton police, kind of a mall security, to protect and to keep the striking fired workers out of the way of the new hires. Nonetheless, violence broke out. 7 people died. For 4 months there was a strike. If the National Guard was called in to maintain order, turning much of the public against unions and workers because they're getting in the way of producing steel and they're causing violence in the public's eye. And eventually the workers gave up and came back to work for the lower pay cut, the equivalent of what the replacement workers were making. So this strike was broken after 4 months, but it weakened the union movement. What did Carnegie do with his money? He believed in the concept of noblesse oblige, or the nobles and rich are obligated to help others. So he donated $350 million or more, set up institutions and project programs. There's a Carnegie Library in just about every city and university in the country. Carnegie Hall in New York. He donated vast amounts of money to cultural institutions, but he was definitely anti-union. And that's it from one of our monopolist titans of industry, Mr. Carnegie, and some guy in an aloha print shirt.